Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Thor Thursday edition of the Fantasy Life Show. I'm Matthew Friedman, Matt F. the Oracle, and I'm here with our college football and NFL draft expert, Thor Nystrom, who has had his boots on the ground for the 2025 Senior Bowl. And in this episode, Thor is going to give us his grades for how some of the key players at the event performed this week. So let's get into it. Thor Thursday, presented by our friends at DraftKings. All right, Thor, you are in Mobile, Alabama right now. You look like a dude who has spent the past 4 days in Mobile, Alabama. How's it going?
It's going well, my friend. We had a great time down here. Very interesting week. We learned a lot, saw a lot of interesting prospects. Excited to talk about it today.
All right, well, let's start at the quarterback position. One of those interesting prospects, Jalen Milroe. Who I think is something of a divisive prospect. You and I were both high on him entering the week. In previous mocks, we both had him going in the top 10, in part because of his dual threat skill set, in part because of the positional need in the top 10. In one recent mock, I had him going as high as number 3. And that was more just to sort of experiment with, hey, what happens if the Browns take a quarterback at number 3 or number 2 rather, and the Giants take a quarterback at number 3. But I think, if he goes in the top 10, number 6 to the Raiders is more realistic. But now we kind of have to question, based on how he performed this week, whether top 10 is even realistic, whether the first round is realistic. What are your thoughts on how Jalen Milroe performed this week at the Senior Bowl?
Not well. That was a guy that needed a big pre-draft process. And if he got it, you could have seen the trajectory of an Anthony Richardson coming out of Florida a couple years ago. We know that Jalen Milroe is going to dominate at the NFL Combine a month from now. He's going to run in the 4.3s, around 225 pounds, and he has the enormous arm. Getting it downfield. It's the throwing nuance, short and intermediate, throwing on time, anticipatory throws that we haven't seen from Jalen Milroe in his career, and then the consistent accuracy that we hadn't seen quite yet. And you see flashes of it with Milroe. You saw them throughout his career. We wanted to see them coalesce a little bit more this week. We didn't at all. And the one thing I'll say in Jalen Milroe's defense is that for a prospect like him in one of these all-star exhibitions, the quarterbacks, it's difficult on those initial couple days when you are asked to throw short and intermediate on time to prospects that you are just meeting, wide receiver prospects that you're just meeting that you've never played with before. You don't know the playbook. So there was a higher degree of difficulty for him, but he didn't turn it around as of Thursday. We got through all 3 of the practices, and it was accuracy all over the place. If I had to grade Jalen Milroe's week, I would give him an F. That was a guy where if you got the A, you were on that trajectory to potentially go in the top 10. I don't think Jalen Milroe is going there, and he's going to need an enormous NFL Combine and the narrative to change on him to go in the first round. I think the odds would even be against that at this point after what we saw this week.
I would agree, unfortunately, because I was excited about the idea of having him go in the first round. Now it feels like he's more of a day 2 kind of guy, and maybe not even then, just depending on what teams' impressions of him are at the Combine. So wait and see on Jalen Milroe, but certainly stock down for him. Jackson Dart is another quarterback that I'm pretty intrigued by, and he's gotten some hype recently. I remember, Thor, that before the season started, you and I recorded a show in New York in which you looked at the college football futures markets. One of the guys you talked about in that show was Jackson Dart as a potential Heisman Trophy candidate. He didn't get there, but he did lead the nation this past year with 11.5 adjusted yards per attempt. He's also got some good rushing ability. This class is starved for quarterback prospects. He could really shoot up the board. What are your thoughts on Jackson Dart in general, and how do you grade him based on his Senior Bowl performance?
I'm going to give his Senior Bowl performance a C-. I thought he more or less hit the – and I'm going to grade on a curve here, Friedman, or a bell curve. But I thought he more or less hit the ball down the fairway. We didn't see the high-end flashes, though, that we were hoping for. So I'm gonna put it at a C-. We did learn some interesting things about Jackson Dart, though. You were sort of setting it up well there, Friedman, of you just look at his recruiting pedigree, was a top 10 quarterback quarterback coming out of high school, signed with USC, played in an air raid offense there. And you look at the pedigree, you look at the size, you look at the athletic profile, ran for a bunch of yards in college, those different things, the production, you would think that you're looking at a top 40 pick. The question that I have had about Jackson Dart and others have about Jackson Dart is you're coming out of this Mickey Mouse offense that Lane Kiffin runs, where you get the decision for you pre-snap based on the numbers. A lot of times he was going to Trey Harris as his first read. Jackson Dart last year, he was top 10 in the nation in percentage of his throws that were wide open, which speaks more to his scheme than it does Jackson Dart. You're not going to be getting that in the NFL. So when you have to beat defenders with timing, when you have to go to your third read, fourth read, what is your decision-making process like then? We saw Sam Howell his last season coming out of UNC, where he went from a projected first-round pick, fell all the way to the fifth round because the scheme that he played in college, the Phil Longo thing, it gave you pre-snap reads, and when the first read wasn't there, we'd see Sam Howell tucking and running quite a bit. That's something that we saw from Jackson Dart as well. I think he's shown a little bit more progression with that, certainly than Sam Howell. I see him going to the second progression quite a bit. I don't see him going to the other side of the field on his tape to his third read. Didn't see that on the field here either, although in the Senior Bowl, that's more understandable, again, with the circumstances. But it's an open-ended question whether Jackson Dart in a pro-style system would be able to get all the way down the progression line. We just haven't seen it before. We did ask him about that at his podium session, about the different offenses that he has played in, and then the criticism of him going down the read ladder there. And Jackson Dart, he, of course, sort of laughed it off and thought it's absurd. It was like, go back to the tape and watch. And I was just thinking in my head, I've seen your tape, kid. You don't run a pro-style system. It is not an out-of-bounds question. It's the biggest question on your evaluation. I know he wants that one to go away, but in this forum here, not necessarily the way that you could answer that, the way these all-star exhibitions are set up, but more or less hit it down the fairway. We saw his physical ability on display, but his biggest question, he couldn't answer that.
We are approaching hardcore Thor when he starts calling prospects kids. Absolutely love it that we're at this time of year. All right, the next guy I want to talk about, Dylan Gabriel, who feels a little bit like the Bo Nix of this class. And I'm not just saying that because he finished his career at Oregon. He's older because he's a sixth-year senior. He's bounced around from program to program. He's played a ton of football because he started as a freshman at UCF. He played there, transferred to Oklahoma, played well there, and then last year transferred again to Oregon and finished his college career there. He has 3 seasons on his resume with at least 30 touchdowns passing and no more than 6 interceptions. He has consistently been an efficient passer. The question is, does that translate to the NFL? Thor, how did he do at the Senior Bowl, and what are your big picture thoughts on Dylan Gabriel?
He did well at the Senior Bowl. I would give his grade more like a B+. And when you're giving the assessment of the prospect this week, you're assessing it against the way that we viewed him coming in. For Jackson Dart to hit it down the fairway, not as good for his evaluation as for Dylan Gabriel to confirm that he's Dylan Gabriel. He was just doing Dylan Gabriel things out there. But based on this quarterback class that we're in, where you have only the 2 guys at the top and not certainly a once-in-a-decade type prospect, either Cam Ward or Shadir Sanders. And then the big drop-off, not as deep of a quarterback class as well. A guy like Dylan Gabriel, who number 2 all-time in the FBS in throwing yards. You mentioned all the dropbacks. He's had 3 different schools that he was at. He's seen everything. Now, he's a little pint-sized lefty, right? He's going to measure in a little bit beneath 6 feet. He's going to measure in, weigh in, I believe, a little bit less than 200 pounds as well. Certainly does not have the howitzer arm, but he maneuvers around well in the pocket. He senses pressure well. He's one of those little quarterbacks that will find his throwing lane. He's bouncing around. He'll move around in the pocket so he can find that window to throw. And he's accurate. He had one of the highest adjusted accuracy percentages that we saw in the NCAA last year. This is a staple of his game going back. He's even modified his game to overcome the limitations a little bit. He was a good good deep ball thrower in college football, despite not having the howitzer arm, because he knows the coverage look that he is seeing right away. He has that super processor for a brain, and he will, when he's got the one-on-one on the outside with the guy running a fly route, he'll let the ball fly real quick and then throw it with loft, a bit like Russell Wilson, but get rid of that ball a little bit quicker and then let the receiver run under it. Dylan Gabriel not making the mistakes out there, you saw a contrast with him and some of these other quarterbacks where they were turning the ball over late on their reads, their progressions. They needed to see the wide receiver wide open before throwing it. Dylan Gabriel, he looked like the veteran hand out there. So I would give Dylan Gabriel more like a B plus, A minus for his grade this week.
The statement of Dylan Gabriel doing Dylan Gabriel things just makes me think of the scenario of like him looking at the mirror to pump himself up and be like, do you know who you are? You're Dylan Gabriel. Go out there and do Dylan Gabriel things. So we will see how that translates to the NFL. Thor, before we move on to the running back position, just kind of big picture look at the quarterbacks in general. This is obviously not last year's class, where we had 6 guys, surprisingly, but 6 guys go in the top 12. Now that we're exiting the Senior Bowl, do you feel like it's just pretty cleanly? We've got 2 guys. They're probably going in the top 10, but it's probably just those 2 guys who end up in round 1.
Yes. Yeah, I think we see those guys real quick, and I don't think you see a quarterback again for a while. I think day 2 probably. And Milroe, we'll see how emphatically he can change the narrative about him at the NFL Combine. I can already tell you, just like he's a loser this week or a stock down, Milroe is going to be a big stock up there. Will it be enough to salvage what coming out of this week to get him back in the first round discussion? We'll have to see. But yeah, you're going to get the big drop off after those first 2 guys. Quinn Ewers, some people are still hyping up Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers took a big step back this year at Texas. He should have transferred. He should have gone in the portal and then taken the NIL bag. I heard there wasn't as much interest for Quinn Ewers in the NIL market as perhaps he was hoping for, and that's what led to him declaring. But yeah, the secondary quarterback prospects, you have an argument about who should be the quarterback after those top 2 guys, and then where should he go? But right now it's looking like it's not going to be the first round for QB3.
All right, so overall, not a great showing at the Senior Bowl for the quarterback class. Let's get to the running backs, but first, a word from our friends at DraftKings. Super Bowl 59 is right around the corner, and it is the perfect time to get in on the action with our friends at DraftKings Sportsbook. Right now, they're giving all new customers $200 in bonus bets instantly after betting just $5. So this is your shot to make every last play a moment to be remembered. Don't wait. Download the DraftKings app now and sign up using the code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. All right, let's get to those running backs. And Thor, this looks like a pretty strong running back class in general, and a number of really intriguing guys at the Senior Bowl. I want to start with Ollie Gordon, who entered the season with a lot of hype at Oklahoma State after in 2023, he had 2,000 yards from scrimmage, over 2,000 yards from scrimmage, with 22 touchdowns. He didn't replicate that success last year, but there were mitigating factors, and he didn't have a bad season. So how did he do at the Senior Bowl, and what are your thoughts on him now?
Because of that drop off, Mr. Friedman, that's why we were so interested to see Ollie Gordon out on the field this week in Mobile. How did your production essentially get cleaved in half on that Oklahoma State team this past season? And I think we got an answer for that. It was the supporting cast, which isn't to absolve Ollie Gordon. It is to explain the kind of prospect and player that the NFL is getting in Ollie Gordon. He is a running back who is context dependent, right? And probably usage specific in the NFL as well, which we can talk about in a second. But the supporting cast fell off there this past season. They did not have good quarterback play, and the offensive line wasn't great for Oklahoma State this year either. So Ollie Gordon ended up getting ganged up on. What Ollie Gordon is not is a world-class athlete, but what he is the big back, that 230 plus pound package. He knows how to pass block. He's a really slick pass blocker. He has some of the best running back pass blocking film that I've seen so far this class. He sees it really quickly. The first sign of danger, he steps up, and he's got a really cool blocking move. He just takes out the knees. He just squares himself up and just goes, he wipes everyone out there. He's also a really good receiver. Again, you don't get the explosion with him, but it reminds you a bit of Najee Harris coming out of Alabama, how they would pump the targets at him, and he was just really reliable with it. That's what you get from Ollie Gordon. As a runner, he's going to be a between the tackles, more or less gets what's blocked for you guy, but he's going to get what's blocked for him. And maybe a yard two extra. It's a guy that falls forward as well. He's got decent feet, does not have long speed for sure, and he's a bit stiff in the hips. But again, he's a tough kid. He has good vision. You have the one cut thing with Ollie Gordon, and you're going to get the passing game utility from him as well. You need a good offensive line in front of him. If you do, that's going to facilitate him out into the second level. He's a build-up speed guy, so that's why you only saw those explosive runs. You get out there, in that second level in college, and once he was out past the third level, you would see him at top speed, which was decent for a big back. But Ollie Gordon, I thought it was a pretty solid week for him, all things considered. So yeah, we'll give him a solid B for performance this week in Mobile.
All right, take out the knees with the blocking move. Had some real sweep the leg Cobra Kai energy. So we'll see how Ollie Gordon performs at the combine. Really be curious to see about the athleticism there. Another guy curious about, RJ Harvey. He finished his college career with back-to-back big seasons, over 1,600 yards, 17 touchdowns as a junior, and then last year as a senior, over 1,800 yards with 25 touchdowns. And Thor, you had the opportunity to interview him at the Senior Bowl. Let's go ahead and play that clip now.
FantasyLife's Thor Nystrom here with UCF running back RJ Harvey. RJ, you had a really interesting start to your college career. You go to Virginia as undersized dual threat quarterback. You spent a year there, and obviously then you go to UCF and you transition to running back. What does the quarterback background do for your game as a running back? Is it, you see the field any different, or?
Yeah, before every snap, my eyes are everywhere. I'm looking at everybody on the field. I'm trying to see where the defense, how they're lined up. And I'm looking up, trying to see what gaps are open, and I'm trying to see if, how the safeties are playing, or if somebody's coming on a blitz. But I feel like playing quarterback has improved my vision.
You could be used as a receiver more. And yet, I don't know if you know this, you're one of two backs in this class from the FBS that have 1.25 yards per route run or more each of the last two seasons.
Oh, okay.
But you absolutely have ceiling to explore there. What else do you think you could bring an NFL passing offense that you weren't able necessarily to show in UCF scheme?
Yeah, just different types of routes. At UCF, it was just a select few routes that I was able to showcase. I mean, that was in the system that we did, but there's a lot of routes that I wasn't able to showcase at UCF. And, out here at the Reese's Senior Bowl, I'm just trying to showcase what I can do out here in front of all these scouts and coaches.
Who do you comp yourself to?
I try not to compare myself to anybody, but I love watching, Le'Veon Bell. I love watching Adrian Peterson. I love watching, Bucky Irvin, what he did this year. I love watching what he did.
RJ Harvey, one of the most explosive backs in this class. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, Thor, I love that interview. I love how you quoted some receiving stats to him, and he was like, oh, okay, like on his route production, like, oh, okay, that's cool. I didn't know that. I love it when guys say, like, I try not to compare myself to anyone, and then they list, like, all-time great running backs about, like, the guys that they at least like to look at, Le'Veon Bell, Adrian Peterson, and then, of course, Bucky Irving getting the mention there. Thor, talk about Harvey at the Senior Bowl and what your thoughts are on how he performed there.
Yeah, it was interesting, his response about his receiving usage at UCF. He clearly had a few qualms about the way he was deployed as a receiver there. He also, the guy who was talking to him before me, made a comment about the quarterback wasn't really getting me the ball beginning of the season, maybe a reference to KJ Jefferson. UCF did not have the best quarterback play this year. And RJ Harvey, he only ends up with 20 catches, but he's a really good receiver. The yards per route run in part tells his story there. Certainly his tape does as well. He's not wrong. UCF should have used him more as a wide receiver and in more dynamic ways. Now, he got the usage as a runner in that system. So, overall, as far as the overall workload, I can't have a qualm with that or the production that he did with that. But I think you're going to get more of the receiving game from RJ Harvey in the NFL. You have an interesting bowling ball build here at 5'7" 3/4, 207 pounds. But in college, he played 212, 213. I think he could get up to 215. And in that compact frame, you get world-class speed. I asked RJ Harvey, I told him, I said, we got reports on the internet that say you ran a 4.3 coming out of high school. Would it be safe to say that you will be running in the 4.3s at the combine? And he sort of had a wry grin with that. He seems pretty bullish that he will be cracking the 4.4 number. So you get that speed and a guy who can access that speed because he runs really hard. He runs with a bit more power than you would think because it's like the Einstein equation with the force and and that's the way that kid runs and super duper low to the ground. He also has really good lateral agility and vision. So he can both change the launch point angle of a defender when he leaves his feet, like right up in that beat to contact and turn it into an off angle attempt. He also sees guys crashing through the line right away. And at UCF, he would bounce it around to the outside and then start outrunning outside linebackers. He got a portion of his explosive runs at UCF doing that. He's not going to be able to do that thing to that degree in the NFL where the athleticism is much better, but he can run between the tackles. And again, I think you're going to see more of the receiving element from RJ Harvey's game in the NFL. This week was more or less nondescript for RJ Harvey. He didn't have as many flash plays, a couple of the other running backs out there. You did see the athleticism though. His high-end speed that was tracked by the Zebra system that they use out in the field in Mobile. He was the second fastest top speed running back that we had here, 20 miles an hour. It was just a tick under Trevor Etienne, was 20.18. But you saw the athleticism with some of those different things. But more or less just, like a C- type of a week, I would say, for RJ Harvey here.
I love that normally if you have a player transitioning to running back, it's wide receiver. And I tend to be interested in those guys a lot. Here, a rarer situation where you have the quarterback who has transitioned to running back in his career, who's had success. I'll be curious to see if he's able to extend that success into the NFL. And also very curious to see what his combine numbers look like for multiple reasons for that. All right, another guy to talk about at the Senior Bowl, Brashard Smith. Now, Smith started his career back up at Miami for years. Then he transferred to SMU for his final season. He had a strong showing there, over 1,600 yards, 18 touchdowns. What were your thoughts on how he performed at the Senior Bowl?
Sometimes a player just has to find the right position to find their destiny, and that's the case of Brashard Smith. Found the running back position and was a devastating receiving back in the ACC last year. And he's going to bring the receiving utility to the NFL. I don't know how much else he's going to bring to the NFL, but it was imperative for Brashard Smith to show up here in Mobile and prove that he was one of the best receiving backs at this event, or the best. Again, that is the trait that is going to carry him to the NFL. He definitely did that. He's a good slot receiver. That's what he is, but he's being deployed out of the backfield. The routes he runs, they're receiver routes. And he has a really good understanding of the angles to run routes and the tempo, how to run routes coming out of the backfield. Much further understanding than some of these other guys. And so you see really cool things with the way that he sets defenders up along his route path in order to get to the point where now we get the foot in the dirt and we get the quick acceleration. And you see the consistent separation with Brashard Smith. There wasn't a linebacker or a safety here that was sticking with Brashard Smith in the one-on-ones. The footwork and the know-how was just too good. So he proved the concept of the receiving utility. We're going to find out next month how he tests, but assuming he doesn't fall on his face in Indianapolis with the athletic testing, he's a smaller back. So he's not going to be an elite athlete, but you just need to be good enough because you have the receiving skill that the NFL is going to like. So very good week for Brashard Smith. This was a guy where if he did not have a good pre-draft process, he would not have been drafted. I think he pretty dang near punched his ticket into the NFL draft. We're going to find out based on his testing where he ends up going on day 3. But a team looking for a receiving back, that's what you're going to be getting in Brashard Smith.
Do you feel like with Smith, someone like Theo Riddick is maybe sort of like the best case type of comp or best case type of outcome for what he could be in the NFL?
Something like that, or what people wanted, like a Kenny Gainwell to be, like somebody like that. But yeah, it is a pure receiver. There's going to be at no point in Brashard Smith's NFL career where he is not going to be the worst between the tackles runner on his roster. You're not going to want to give him the ball used in that way. But sending him on routes out of the backfield, we've already seen what happens there. There wasn't ACC linebackers or strong safeties that could stay with him. Now we jump up in competition at the Senior Bowl, and we learned there wasn't any here either. So the NFL defenders certainly will have a much better shot. But again, this is a one-trick pony, so you need to come out here and show that trick was pretty cool. Brashard Smith showed that his trick was pretty cool.
All right, so putting a bow on the running back position, obviously you have Ashton Jeanty at the top, who has a shot of going in the top 10, and it feels like no possible way could Jerry Jones resist drafting him if he is there at number 12. But the running back position, it happens year in and year out. There are guys who go on day 2, early in day 3, who end up making significant contributions to the NFL. And it feels like this is a pretty intriguing running back class where we could have a number of guys on day 2 who become NFL starters and could be starters for a while. Some guys who go on day 3 who could end up being meaningful contributors for a lengthy period of time. What are your overall thoughts on this running back class exiting the Senior Bowl?
This is the best running back class since I've been doing draft analysis. You have the guy at the top, you have a legitimate second and third tier, and then you have utterly ludicrous depth. Whereas where it really stands out from the running back class is some of these ones that we've seen over the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years. The depth of it is just crazy, and you got an idea of that here as well at the Senior Bowl. They had like 10 running backs out there. They're all going to be guys that hang around in the NFL. I sent out a tweet at some point this week of, if you're a team right now that has a couple vacancies in your running back room on that depth chart, you got a couple guys that are going to be free agents, or maybe you got a guy that you're going to cut. This would be the year to consider doing what the Packers did several years ago when they took Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams in the same draft. You don't see that strategy deployed often, of a team taking 2 running backs in one draft class. This is the year that you might want to consider doing that, because you're going to get a round and a half, maybe even upwards of a 2-round discount on running backs in April based on where they would have been drafted only the year before, when you had the terrible running back class that fell off really quickly. You're going to have undrafted running backs, multiple of them from this class, that stick in the NFL for years and contribute in the NFL for years. So yeah, you have crazy depth with it. And what we're trying to figure out here, Friedman, one of the things, we were keeping an eye on this week in Mobile, we know the top 5 running backs. Though that's the one thing of this class. You can probably set it in stone. Yeah, you mentioned Jeanty at the top. You have the tier 2, in my opinion, of Caleb Johnson, Omari, and Hampton, the big backs. And then tier 3, it's the pair of Ohio State kids, Travion and Quinshon Judkins, what we're trying to figure out with the landscape of this potentially historic running back class is, how does it stack up after that? Right, starting from running back 6, you have a bunch of guys in there. Devin Neal, who we saw down here, RJ Harvey, we just talked about him. Ollie Gordon's in that discussion. Cam Scadaboo, who we were hoping to see here. He pulled out of the event the day before. He had a long season, of course, with a bunch of usage. Kyle Monangai, DJ Giddens, who wasn't at this event, but we'll see him at the NFL Combine. There's just a whole bunch of these dudes. So yeah, you got crazy depth here, and this is the year to be shopping for running backs in the NFL draft.
For my money, the 2008 prospect class, which was headlined by Darren McFadden, that feels like kind of the deepest class that we've had in the past 2 decades or so. You had 5 running backs go in the first round. That doesn't happen anymore. But one of those guys was Chris Johnson. You had Matt Forte and Ray Rice in round 2. You had Jamal Charles and Steve Slayton in the 3rd round. You had Tim Hightower in the 5th round. Like there were legit guys going all throughout that draft. Obviously, different era. Running backs are used differently now. No one goes that high anymore. But this feels like potentially, if things break right for a number of guys, they get in the right landing spots, we could have multiple guys going throughout the 2nd round, the 3rd round, who end up being longtime producers in the NFL. All right, we're going to get to the wide receivers. But first, let's talk about our friends at New Era. Get ready to witness the 59th battle for the Lombardi Trophy with the New Era cap. The Chiefs and the Eagles have claimed their conference titles and are heading to New Orleans for the ultimate showdown. And whether you're rooting for the AFC or the NFC champions, New Era cap has the official playoff celebration caps worn by the pros. Gear up for a shot at eternal glory with the official cap of Super Bowl 59. All right, Thor, let's talk about those wide receivers. And let's start with Tez Johnson, wide receiver out of Oregon. So started out at Troy, transferred to Oregon for his final 2 seasons, where he caught passes from Bo Nix and then Dylan Gabriel, whom we talked about earlier. In those 2 years, over 2,000 yards receiving, 20 touchdowns. Thor, you interviewed him at the Senior Bowl. Let's take a look at that clip.
FantasyLife's Thor Nystrom here with Oregon wide receiver Tez Johnson, who is an unfair matchup for defensive backs and one-on-ones out here in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. You know, through the first 3 days, obviously we're done with practices now that day 3 just got done. How would you assess your performance?
I think I still got some work to do. I did good the first couple days, but I still think I got something to prove in. It's something that I know and I'm aware of, but I mean, this is right here is normal for me. I came from a school where we practice hard every day, so coming out here and just showcasing what I have has just been, it's normal to me.
Thinking about your game transition into the NFL, you know, some names get tossed out. One of them was here a couple years ago, Tank Dell. I'm curious who you comp your game to or who you pattern it after.
It's definitely Tank. When I get in the locker room right now, I text him, or he probably already texted me. So me and Tank is very close.
Really? What has he helped you with or advice that he's given you?
He know what it takes to be the best. He was here before me. He know how to create separation. He's one of the best at it. And he definitely gave me ideas and definitely helped me along the way throughout the season too. And I definitely take whatever he says to the heart because he's seen it before, he's done it before, and he having really good success with it.
Tez Johnson.
Thor, I love how there are times when you can look at it and say like, all right, his agent told him to say that. You know, like the agent sort of gave him the perspective of like, hey, when someone asks how you think you're doing, be humble, say like, still got work to do. Like NFL teams are going to love that. And the comp to Tank Dell is really interesting. Thor, what is your perspective on maybe the players he might be comparable to, and then also how he did at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have a big group there that you can compare him to because Tez Johnson comes into this event measuring in at 5'9" and 1/4 and 156 pounds. You don't have a lot of NFL wide receivers group that you can potentially compare him to. Tank Dell is an obvious one. So that's why we asked the question. I thought it was super interesting that Tez Johnson was like, yeah, I always text Tank Dell, and he just texted me when I was in the locker room there. He certainly found the right mentor. When you're thinking about his transition to the NFL, they have slightly different games though. Tank Dell is so sudden coming off the line, and his footwork was just so fast. We saw him really abusing the defenders down here in Mobile a couple years ago. It was interesting after the first day when no one could stay with Tank Dell off the line, just getting abused. They started at his route breaks, grabbing his jersey on the second day of Tank Dell's Senior Bowl. We saw a bunch of the fake refs that they have out there. They would throw their flags, as they don't often do, but it was so obvious with him. Tez Johnson was creating big separation here as well, and that was drawing some oohs and ahs. The thing I think that he is talking about as far as the things to work on, I think he's talking about his release package off the line going to the NFL when you could get mugged a little bit more. He was getting off the line here, but no one was challenging him in those one-on-ones. Like there's been a couple of funny, and I don't mean to make light of it, but there was a couple of funny TikToks that were put out of Tez Johnson in the one-on-ones. Now, again, he won all these reps and he would get the big separation, but coming off the line, he would have like 14 steps, right? Like, you know, going left, right. Which way am I going to go? Which way am I going to go? And then he would start into his route path. Someone, I forgot who I can credit this with, but they made the joke of, we're seeing some TikTok releases out here on the Senior Bowl field from Tez Johnson. Again, he got off the line cleanly, but you're not going to get 3 seconds for your release package in the NFL, and you're going to get challenged at the line if you start doing stuff like that as well, which, again, we didn't see the defenders moving up on Tez Johnson. I think they were afraid of getting tank dealt, so they didn't want to, you know, try to tango with him within 5 yards of the line. But if he was doing that footwork stuff, he would have been jammed within 5 yards of the line. So that's the sort of thing we're thinking about with Tez Johnson going to the next level. He was super productive in college, started his career at Troy in the Sun Belt, very productive there. That's when he got the call up to Oregon. His first season at Oregon, he got to join his adopted brother, Bo Nix, on that roster. So that's a really cool story. They had a great season together. Obviously, Bo Nix went to the NFL. Tez Johnson stuck around one more year. He is going to get drafted. I don't know if he'll get drafted. I don't know if he'll be rejoining his brother in the NFL. Denver has a lot of skinny receivers already on that roster, but a team that could use a slot receiver that is difficult to stay with in space. We just need to make sure that we scheme him such that defenders can't get free access to him coming off the line to press him.
All right, another wide receiver for the Senior Bowl, Arian Smith, who played his entire career at Georgia, where he was a backup receiver for most of his time there. But as a senior, he emerged as the team's #1 wide receiver. He contributed occasionally as a rusher. And Thor, you also had the pleasure of talking to him in mobile. Let's check out that clip.
Fantasy Life's Thor Nystrom here with Georgia wide receiver Arian Smith. Arian, when I think about you and your game, I think about two things. Number one is speed, obviously. Number two, overcoming adversity. You had the winding road through college. You come in during the COVID season, and then you had the injuries break out this past season and able to show those world-class wheels. First, I want to talk about this speed. Is it true that you ran in the 4.2s coming out of high school?
4.2s coming out of high school? Yeah, I mean, I can't remember that far, but I mean, I would say that I'm around there somewhere.
Excited to show the wheels at the NFL Combine?
Oh yeah, for sure, I'm excited. You know, that's a dream to be able to compete at NFL Combine. I see a lot of my teammates that I played with at Georgia over the last 5 years that I played there, you know, compete and run well at the Combine. So I'm looking forward to doing that, competing there.
Very strong day today, Wednesday, day 2 of practices.
Yes,
you had the awesome adjustment back there, left side of the end zone, I think against WKU safety.
Yes,
made the play back there. How are you feeling so far about your performance here in Mobile?
I mean, I'm feeling good. Of course, I made a couple plays, but I definitely feel like I can play better. You know, adjust and make different plays that I had opportunities to do. So, of course, I'm proud of myself that I got to this point and I'm able to compete with the best of the best. So, you know, I still think there's a lot out there that I can get better at. So, you know, just looking forward for the room of improvement.
Tell me what you have learned through going through all the injuries that you have overcome to get to that breakout season and then get here playing the best of the best.
I mean, I obviously learned a lot, not being able to play and just, like training my mind mentally, being like a resilient person, getting back up after, I'm put on my behind. So just like, going through rehabs and, having those moments where I'm like thinking like rethinking about football and things like that, and like maybe I should have stayed in track or things like that. But no, I don't have any regrets, and I'm glad I did football. And I learned a lot from injury about just getting back up and keep going, no matter what people think about you.
Last question for you, Arian. In the NFL draft world, we love player comps.
Yes,
comparing people to now, there's not many people in the world that run in the 4.2s, so there's a small group for you to compare your game to. But is there someone that you compare your game to, pattern?
One of my favorite players of all time is Deshaun Jackson, so I'll probably say him.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I love that. Thanks a lot, Arian.
Yes,
All right. The Deshaun Jackson comp. Thor, what are your thoughts on Arian Smith at the Senior Bowl? How do you grade him? Does he, in fact, compare to Deshaun Jackson?
I won't be comparing him to Deshaun Jackson. I like the gumption of Arian Smith, though. I really enjoyed talking to him. The straight line speed is what his calling card is. He doesn't have the agility of Deshaun Jackson, and we're gonna have to see if he ends up having the ball skills, as well. Dropsies was the issue for Arian Smith last year at Georgia, but he had the adversity earlier in his career that I was talking to him about. He went to Georgia during the COVID shortened season in 2020. And from there, you had all kinds of injuries. I mean, like the laundry list of them. He had 2 separate wrist injuries at Georgia. He had a broken leg. He had a meniscus injury. He had a significant high ankle sprain. He had soft tissue injuries. So for 2021 through 2023, it was on again, off again for Arian Smith, and most of the time off the field, having all these injuries. This past season, he finally stayed healthy his last season there in Athens, and he had that breakout year that you were talking about. That, again, the one bugaboo with it was he had 10 drops, and his drop rate was over 17%. That is a huge red flag heading into the NFL, but you have the world-class speed. Again, not many guys in the world run the high 4.2s, low 4.3s. He was on Georgia's track team. Arian Smith was. He had the 4.28 coming out of high school reported. I found it interesting that Arian Smith said he couldn't remember back to the year 2019. Okay. But I mean, that's what we've seen online. But we'll see how he does at the NFL Combine. But the dropsies thing, being the one thing coming in, it was impressive to see him making some of these plays down the field. I didn't see, I'm sure it happened at some point this week. You can't watch everyone concurrently at the same time down there, but I didn't see him drop the ball. Well, I saw him make multiple good contested catches, like the one that we just showed, getting the adjustment there in the back of the end zone. We saw more of that this week from Arian Smith. So between that, making the argument, my ball skills are getting a little bit better. The previous years, I didn't have as much experience as some guys because of things outside of my control. Prove that, and then prove the concept of your speed, and he's probably going to go late day 3.
Yeah, I love the I don't remember that far back. Has some real I'm sorry, Senator, I don't recall type of vibes. Let's go to Jalen Royals. Now, this is a guy who really intrigues me from a statistical standpoint. So after high school, he played 1 year at the Georgia Military College, and then he transferred into Utah State, where he did literally nothing his sophomore year there offensively. No receptions, no carries. And then as a junior, bam, led the team with over 1,000 yards receiving, 15 touchdowns. And then as a senior, missed 5 games, played in just 7 games, and he still led the team with 834 yards and 6 touchdowns, again, in just 7 games. That's some real production. Thor, how did Royals do at this at the Senior Bowl, and what are your thoughts on him now?
Considering the circumstance that he was playing under coming in here, I would give Royals like a B+ for how he acquitted himself out there. Royals got knocked out for the season this year with a foot injury in October. And I wasn't sure that he was going to be back here in time. I don't think Jalen Royals' camp knew for sure a month before. It was a push to be here. Jalen Royals wanted to be on this stage. You walked through his career there, Friedman, where he came from. It's a guy who was overlooked his whole life, right? You didn't get the until the late breakout there at Utah State. And then you got the 1 year, and then this past season, your season gets cut short. That was a kid that wanted to come out and compete against the best of the best in front of the NFL and make an argument to show I belong. And he did that despite not being physically 100%. He was good enough to get out there and compete, and he did. And he was playing strong. I retweeted a clip of him blowing a guy up coming off the line and that, running downfield, making a play. He looked good, but not, again, 100%. But credit to him for coming out and playing. This is a guy in a big fortified frame, 210 pounds. He believes that he's going to be used as a big slot in the NFL. We were kind of laughing. I brought up the name A.J. Brown to him as a guy who was used out of the slot at Ole Miss as sort of a big frame guy with the play strength coming off the line and the good ball skills, and a guy with fluid movement. Now, Jalen Royals is not A.J. Brown, but it's sort of on the same sort of player type. Jalen Royals, he wanted to come out here and show, I think, that a day two type of a guy. And I think he is on that trajectory. He has proved the health. He has now proved it on the field against the Senior Bowl prospects. And we're going to find out next month at the NFL Combine, both the medical rechecks, making sure the NFL is cool with everything going on with that foot. And then also now that at that point, he will be fully healthy, the athletic testing, what can we get out of that big frame? But I like his release package. I like the way that he moves for that size, a very fluid mover. And then the play strength and the ball skills at that size. He's going to be a really efficient NFL big slot, I believe, and a good week for Jalen Royals down here in Mobile.
All right, so those are the wide receivers. We will get to the tight ends in a minute, but first, a word from our friends at Bud Light.
Even if you score, always stay hungry. No matter how hard you football, it's easy to Sunday.
All right, Thor, let's get to the tight ends. This is, I think, a strong tight end class. We have two guys at the position who will probably go in round one. And then after them, there's some really quality depth. And let's start with Harold Fannin, a true junior, played his entire career at Bowling Green State, a move tight end, a receiving tight end, 6'4", 230 pounds. He's essentially a big-bodied slot receiver, and you see that in the numbers. As a sophomore, 623 yards, 6 touchdowns receiving. Those numbers for a tight end would be good enough on their own. But then as a junior, just takes it up to a whole other level, sets FBS records with 117 receptions, 1,555 yards receiving, 10 touchdowns. And then he also added throughout his career 33 carries for 159 yards and 5 touchdowns. So he has a wide skill set, which is very impressive. And Thor, you talked to him at the Senior Bowl. Let's get that clip.
Fantasy Life's Thor Nystrom here with Bowling Green. Should we say tight end, Harold Fannin Jr., or should we say offensive weapon? What do you prefer?
I like the second one, man. I like that a lot. But just for right now, just say tight end.
Harold Fannin Jr., a player that lines up everywhere and catches every dang ball that is thrown his way. What are you trying to do this week to prove to NFL evaluators that maybe they haven't already seen on your film, an aspect of your game?
I'll say blocking, obviously run blocking. I feel like, catching a lot of passes is nice, but they want to see if I'm able to do the dirty work, and that's what I came in to do, just do the dirty work.
You're obviously coming off the most prolific receiving season in FBS history. You think about your game going to the next level. Who do you pattern your game after, or who would you compare your game to that's in the NFL right now?
Right now, I say Isaiah Likely. You know what I mean?
I like that. Yeah. Harold Fannin Jr., a staple of action over the last couple of years. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Yeah.
Thor, Fannin is a really intriguing prospect. You said it to him, tight end or offensive weapon. How do you see him projecting to the NFL, and what is your grade on him now based on what we saw at the Senior Bowl?
I'm going to give him a B- for his performance at the Senior Bowl. There's some people that were a little bit more down on it, I think, than I was, but I thought he looked okay out there. And the metrics that we got from the tracking system, I think, showed Harold Fannin Jr. to be more athletic on the field than perhaps our lying eyes told us in the stands. There was some grumbling, especially the initial couple of days, about, oh, that's Harold Fannin. Like, I thought he'd be faster, or I thought he'd be quicker, I thought he'd be more agile. He's the 6'3", 230-pound, big slot. He's not an inline tight end, but moving him all over the place. You wanted to see some more athleticism from him coming off the season where he shattered all the FBS records, receptions for a tight end, receiving yards for a tight end, et cetera, et cetera. More missed tackles forced, PFF stat as well. But and I thought that too. Of like, I thought he was going to be a little bit quicker, a little bit faster. Like when I had seen his film, he's licked some Power 5 competition. Texas A&M, he had a big game. Penn State, he had a big game. But then you look at the Zebra on-field testing metrics that they had with the chips. He had the fastest max speed of the tight ends. You could get the max speed. He was around Pat Bryant and Daquan Felton, wide receivers, in terms of that metric. He also had the fastest max deceleration of the tight ends and max acceleration. So he actually tested. You compare Harold Fannin, just the way he was moving, I'm talking out there in Mobile, not the skill of his game, just the athletic stuff. You can compare that to the last 6 or 7 classes of the Senior Bowl with the Zebra testing. We've had it since then. He was one of the most athletic tight ends we've seen by the numbers. So again, a bit of a discrepancy between what you think you're seeing and what you actually are seeing. He's a bit of a deceiving kind of a mover, and I think this explains in part why he always has separation and why he's always open. Bowling Green threw the ball to him like 150, 160 times last year. They just couldn't help themselves. And you mentioned they were manufacturing the other touches for him behind the line of scrimmage, handing the ball off to him. It was like the way that Brock Bowers was used at Georgia. It was just a more intense YOLO, type version of that at Bowling Green with Harold Fannin Jr. And it is an offensive weapon. That's how I view him. It's not as a tight end. The same with Bowers. He's not as good of a prospect as Bowers, but it's a similar type physical package. And it's a guy you move all around the formation. You manufacture the targets for him within 8 yards of the line of scrimmage or so, and you watch him go. He's really difficult to get to the ground. And again, the athletic testing numbers was a really good sign for Harold Fannin Jr. because that was the one question that we had about him coming into the process. Just how athletic will he be at that package, in that physical package? We know the production was so good at the college level. What kind of an athlete is he? And I think we've gotten enough of a proof of concept on that to feel decent about him heading into the NFL Combine and what we're going to see from Harold Fannin there.
All right, the last guy we'll spend a couple minutes on, Elijah Arroyo, played his entire career at Miami, backup for most of it. Then last year was the number 1 tight end for his team, had 590 yards, 7 touchdowns. What are your thoughts on his performance at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, in Miami's offense here this past season, when it jumped up numerous different notches with Cam Ward going there, and you were in the Shannon Dawson air raid system, Damian Martinez had transferred down there too. They threw for all those yards, but Arroyo was a tertiary type, receiving option on that team, and so you were sort of wondering, it looks like he moves well on tape, but he's going to have to be a big slot in the NFL. He's not going to be playing in line. He's not a great blocker. So he needs to be a really, really good and skilled receiver that has the athletic profile in order to, at the NFL level, justify pushing a true slot receiver off of the field. We were curious to see that. Was the last year all the balls on that team going to Xavier Restrepo and the secondary receivers that they had over Arroyo? Was that telling of anything that could be useful in terms of his projection? I thought he looked great out there, and maybe was making the argument that I should have been used more in Miami's offense last year. I had a conversation about him one of the nights we were at dinner, having the thought experiment of, if Miami did not have Xavier Restrepo, a guy who can only play in the slot, he's just a true blue slot, isn't a great athlete, but just a really, really good slot receiver. If Xavier Restrepo had not been on that roster, would Arroyo have been deployed more like he should have been deployed, and maybe been the first or second option on way more of the concepts? Because Restrepo was the guy for them in the intermediate range, it sort of cleaved down the usage that Arroyo ended up getting. He was the most impressive receiver that we saw here this week from the tight end position, particularly down the field. I mean, we saw some really cool things from Arroyo, the plays that he was making down the field. And then the red zone work that he did as well. Yesterday, he had a leaping touchdown catch in the back of the end zone, which he punctuated by punting the ball almost out of the stadium in celebration, which I couldn't blame him at that point, because it was at the end of the week and he had such a tremendous week. It's a guy who made a bunch of money here based on the way that he was moving and what we saw from him as a receiver receiver sort of fleshed out a little bit of a hazy part of his evaluation. He also measured in a little bit bigger than I was expecting. And with him going to the combine, it's looking like a guy who is going to test very well there as well. I think he probably feels pretty good at this point that he leaves here with a solid day 2 grade for the NFL draft.
All right, Elijah Arroyo stock up and also showed that he can maybe be the emergency backup punter if the need ever arose. All right, Thor, fantastic stuff. Get home safely, my friend, from Mobile, and have a good rest of your time there. All right, that does it for the Fantasy Life Thor Thursday show. Be sure to catch all of our Super Bowl coverage next week, as well as the great content, tools, projections, and rankings that we have on the site. For Thor Nystrom, I'm Matthew Friedman. Remember, it is not a fantasy if you believe it.